When is the best age for a child to learn how to read? What do you think? 3, 4, 5? Or do you think we might be asking the wrong question entirely? I'm Katie. I'm an AMI primary guide and trainer and training, and I share Montessori insights backed in research so that you can better understand how children learn. So let's start here. The brain is not actually wired for reading. Yeah, that's right. There's a lot of researchers, like, for example, Maryanne Wolf or Stanislas Dehaene, both whose work I love, and I'll put titles to their books below. They explain that reading is a relatively new human invention, like in the scope of human existence. So the brain doesn't come ready for learning to read. Instead, it adapts what's kind of already there. And one important part of this is what neuroscientists call the letterbox, or the visual word form area. And this area is originally used for object and face recognition, but it gets repurposed when we start learning to read, and it becomes specialized for recognizing letters and words. But it doesn't start that way. It develops through repeated experience with language and print. So reading is something the brain has to build. So if you want a range, the optimal window for a child to learn to read is between ages 3 and 8. And knowing that range is very useful, but what we're describing here is a window, not a deadline. The brain is developing the reading system across those years, and that process doesn't follow a single timeline. So between ages 3 and 6, children are in what Maria Montessori described as a sensitive period for language. So it's during this time that they're really driven to absorb vocabulary in their environment and refine their ear to hear different sounds, and they're connecting sounds to the symbols. And this is when the foundations of the reading system are really being laid. So in a Montessori environment, we are supporting this constantly through things like a really rich oral language environment. We're playing lots of sound games where we're helping children hear the sounds in words. We're teaching them the shapes of sounds by using the sandpaper letter. And even the progression of how we teach supports this by teaching writing before we teach reading, so that when reading appears, it comes from a system that's been developing step by step. And between ages 6 and 8, all those brain systems become a lot more coordinated. So children begin to read more fluently, they're understanding more deeply, they're connecting to the meaning of what they're reading. And this reflects exactly what the research models. For example, if you've heard of Scarborough's reading rope, it shows that reading is made up of many strands that are slowly woven together over time. So on one side, we have word recognition, so stuff like phonological awareness, decoding, sight recognition. But on the other side, we have language comprehension. So this is stuff like vocabulary, background knowledge, language structure, verbal reasoning, literacy knowledge. And when these strands become strong and interconnected, that's when fluent reading emerges. We also have research by Sebastian Sugait that shows that starting reading earlier doesn't necessarily lead to long-term outcomes. Children who begin reading later often catch up really quickly once those underlying systems are in place. And with a solid foundation in oral language, things like vocabulary and phonetical awareness, the process of learning to read can move more smoothly with less strain. And in some cases, those children even go on to show stronger comprehension and more sustained interest in reading. So I guess the question shifts. We shouldn't really be asking how early can our child read, but instead, what is supporting the development of the reading system? The 3 to 8 range gives us a developmental window, but within that, children might start reading at 4. Some might read between 5 and 6, and some are going to read closer to 8. And all of these fall within typical development. Reading develops when the brain has built the systems it needs. So give it time to form those connections, and ultimately the result's going to be reading that is solid, meaningful, and lasting.